Thomas Braga Hennebrey. Hello, Thomas. Would you ever consider teaching video editing and or film structure and story for an online university geared towards young conservatives wanting to shape the pop culture? If so, how would you teach it? Great question. I could certainly do it in all of my free time. But that is the kind of thing that I would make a serious effort for. I don't remember what the name of it was. It was on the Speakeasy show that we did that I liked very much. It was just too expensive to do. And I talked about the problem with conservatives is this. I had gone to see a Michael Jackson show in Vegas, and this person in this incredible mask floats in on this crescent moon, and then in the middle of the show, your attention is focused on the stage, and then all of a sudden, on the sides of this enormous theater, there are 4 Michael Jacksons on each wall, and they're moonwalking up the wall. They're moonwalking up the wall, backwards, up the wall. I went, oh my God, incredible. That's just beautiful. And instantly, I started looking for how they did it. And I could see, okay, so obviously there's I got it now. There's a computer-controlled mechanism up there that's bringing them up, and you can almost see the winch. There's a little sign of their body harness here. It's pretty well disguised, but it's just, if you really know where to look for it, and real thin wires, and dark in here. So people like us immediately see something magical, and we try to decide and try to figure out how it was done. That's what practical people do. But what I would like to do is I would like to teach conservatives how to not see the wires. Not how to see the wires. We're good at how to see the wires. How to not see the wires. And that may sound strange to you because they're not visible, and they're not, unless you go looking for them. But by looking for them, you are taking an artistic experience and turning it into an engineering experience. And this is what we do, and it's what we're comfortable with. And it's a mistake. It's a mistake in terms of the big picture politically. This is why we can't reach people emotionally the way the left can. And it's a mistake in terms of the richness of our own individual lives. Because if we spend our lives analyzing the technique of art as it's happening, then we don't get to experience the art. Learning how to not see the wires is going to what I was talking about in the beginning, is understanding, yes, we know that it's not really Michael Jackson walking the moonwalk up the walls because that's impossible. Yes, we all know that. But we've come to this theater with the willing suspension of disbelief, and we are going to have to pretend that we don't know how it's, not even pretend that we don't know how it's done. We just have to stop thinking about it. Just enjoy it. It's an incredible thing to see, is these, 4 and 4, these silhouettes with the hats, just walking up a wall backwards. It's unbelievable. And I'm sorry that I immediately started looking for how it got done. And that practical part of my brain and your brain is what separates us largely from the lower animals, like chimpanzees and progressives and so on. And that's good. But it is a problem. The inability to use and feel and see emotion. I've talked about that when I talk about using emotion and showing people dead bodies rather than talking about murder and all of the things that I'm trying to do. We think that emotion is bad because the left uses it to cheat. And we don't do that. But I've never seen a 4th of July parade with veterans walking by holding up the flag where I didn't start crying a little bit, I've never seen a high performance jet demonstration, F-15 guys or 16s or 22s at an air show. Never watched them without just weeping from the sheer joy of it, from the sheer exuberance of it. And And we need to do more of this, because it's not only better for us politically in terms of getting our message out there to the world, it's also good to let the head sleep for a while. Just put it away. If you want to figure it out, go see it a second time. But anyway, that's that. So I would love to do something like teaching guys how to edit and how to shoot and stuff. The editing especially. Editing is a talent that I didn't even realize existed until I developed it to a pretty high level. And the kind of editing I'm talking about here is, before I started doing this, while I was writing eject, my job was to take anywhere from 40 minutes to maybe an hour and a half of raw footage on 4 cameras synced up and get that to 23 minutes and 30 seconds on the dot, to the frame, to the 30th of a second, to the 29.97th of a second. I would deliver finished shows to the frame. That was just a point of pride for me. Now, that may sound relatively easy, but what it basically means is you have an immovable steel wall at the beginning of the show. That's when the timer stops. And there's another immovable steel wall at the end of the show, which is 23:30 in that particular case. And everything between then, all of this stuff has to fit into here, and it has to fit into there in a way so that people don't know that there was anything else ever shot. In other words, it should look like the cameras were running for 23 minutes and 30 seconds. And that's difficult. The first part of it is you have to have a sense of story. I'll listen to, take anybody. I've cut shows that were starring Clint Eastwood, Steven Spielberg, Tom Cruise, all of them. And I'll listen to them talk for 45 minutes or an hour on the raw footage. And I never took notes, and I never had a script or a paper cut or anything. I just listened to them. And as I'm listening to them talking, there's a part of my editor brain that's going, and then they'll get on something. It's like, remember this is good. And then they'll kind of get off topic again and drift around. Then they'll come back to something, and then they'll drift around, and they'll come say something else that actually belongs with the first part. And I'm kind of doing this in my head live. And I'm, like I said, I'm not taking any notes. I'm just thinking where he starts talking about Fight Club, that's very good. And so on. So then you basically get it down to, 30, maybe 28 minutes. And we do that by something called a radio cut. This was something that surprised me. When editors cut, like a TV show or a movie, they don't cut the picture, they cut the sound. And there's a reason for that, which I'll explain to you. We call it a radio cut because if you watch it, it's nothing but jump cuts. And sometimes it's in the middle of a sentence. I was going to the store the other day and I found that, and when you're watching it, your eye is being tricked, but if you just listen to it, it's seamless. If you can get it to sound seamless, then the rest of it's very simple. When you get to because you had somebody saying something here and ended period, and then they said a whole bunch of nonsense, and then they said something cool here. So I take out the nonsense, put those two together. Visually, there's a jump cut from one to the other, but audio-wise, it's perfectly smooth. And you can do something like do a cutaway to some other person listening to cover that cut, or you can simply cut from camera A to camera B, and you will never, ever know, if the guy's good. I watched Michael Moore's Bowling for Columbine, and I had heard about what he had done in some of these interviews. And if I had Michael Moore talking for an hour, I could make him say anything. Dave Big Booty has an interesting question here. Did I ever try to make someone look like a jerk? Let me tell you about the times I was tempted. We had Michael Moore on that show 3 times. You may remember Michael Moore. It was the 2004 election against Kerry, and things were looking pretty bad, and I despised Michael Moore with every atom in my body. I think he's a filthy liar, a terrible liar, a good liar, but I mean a terrible human being. And he knows he's lying in order to make a point which is inconceivable to me. I can't, and to you too. We can't understand it. We just can't. We cannot understand that there are people out there who intentionally lie about people being Nazis or racists or pedophiles or whatever simply to get power over them. It's inconceivable to us, but he does that. And we had him on the show 3 times, and the third time it was a couple weeks before the election, and I was so tense about the election. And what he said about President Bush was so obnoxious and so wrong. It was, this whole species of, they're the freedom fighters and all the rest of this stuff, And I watched the raw footage, and I had an assistant there, an assistant editor and producer. And I watched the raw footage, and she says, "Okay, so you're ready to get going?" And I would just start to do the cut, and I looked at this thing. I said, "I got to go for a walk." And I walked around for half an hour. So the answer to your question, Dave Big Booty, is this. I could have done it. I could have done it seamlessly. And I didn't do it because Michael Moore does that for a living and I don't. I'm getting paid to do a job. My bosses are hiring me to produce the best TV episode I can possibly produce. And I don't get to steal from them by inserting my opinions in that position. So I have wanted to, and I had the ability to, but I didn't. Let's